The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it Thursdays here. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. We'll continue the trek. That trek being, is it Saturday at 11:04 yet? Nebraska-Indiana, more rounds of Mr. Cignetti making the national appearances. All the Hoosier love. We'll see if that heart gets broken Saturday by Nebraska. 489-1240, 489-1240 to get in. Today here on Hail Varsity, you can dial up toll-free 1-800-825-5865 across the Hail Varsity Radio Network. We ask you to like and subscribe. Tell a buddy about Hail Varsity. The YouTube channels where you can watch the show, Hail Varsity Radio. Twitter at HVarsity Radio is where you can also check things out. Email Chris at hailvarsity.com. Our man in the middle, the Big Red himself, Justice, is blowing out 21 candles today. He's just wrapped up class. He's working his other gig tonight, and we'll probably get a report next week on how the infamous 21st birthday went. Do you remember your 21st?
Oh, yeah, I remember the 21st.
Well, do you remember much of the night?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay, good for you.
It was a Thursday night. So
Same with mine.
And the thing was mine, so my 21st birthday was March of 2020. And a month that will live in infamy.
Yeah.
So I got
Well done. I remember you saying, hey, I don't know if I can go anywhere.
Yeah, so we got our one weekend, and then the entire world shut down and kind of put a real halt to my 21st. We'll hope the whole world doesn't shut down for justices.
No.
I don't think that could happen, but you never know with world political affairs.
I remember it was right around the end of or halfway through District Hoops. We had Lamar Jackson in studio with us.
That Lamar Jackson?
Not the quarterback, but the safety, Lamar Jackson, right? It was before the draft. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic thing grew and grew and grew and grew. And, yeah, it was an interesting spring, to say the least. So, yeah, I kind of remember you talking about your 21st and Lamar looking at the computer screen you're looking at right now saying, dude, things might get nuts. So Justice is will have a much better 21st birthday. I think my roommates cleaned my carpet, thank the Lord, because I got it dirty for my 21st.
See, nothing like that for me. We went over to my buddy Brian's apartment downtown and pre-gamed as you do, because we were counting down. Thursday night was not my 21st. Friday was, so we counted down until midnight.
Gotcha. So you get that first shot.
And if I remember correctly, I think I still made it to my it wasn't an 8 a.m. I think it was a 9:30 on Friday. I still made it to. So
that's impressive.
Yeah.
I did not.
Hey, student first, right?
Student first. I like it. So we'll dive into Nebraska-Indiana, reliving our 21st. You're welcome to share yours in the stream.
I remember Brennan hopped in the stream yesterday. Shout out to Brennan, and talked about how he drank a gallon of beer in 10 minutes on his 21st birthday. He remembers nothing after that. So
was it diesel? Was it light beer? Because if you're going like a milk gallon of Oktoberfest, that's pretty heavy.
IPA.
Yeah, you just need a straw with that. We'll get to our starting five shout-outs here in just a bit. But have you made your mind up yet? Do you know what Nebraska you're going to get on Saturday? And there's levels of inconsistency with the football team, and then there's one side of the football that's been super consistent for the most part. this season. But big ball game and big spotlight, right? Big spotlight for both programs, big spotlight for Nebraska to kind of stabilize and stay in that relevancy conversation. Big moment for Indiana as a lot of the college football predictors have them at a 47% chance to be a college football playoff team and be that squad, that fourth team, that fourth argument from the Big Ten. And I haven't let my mind go to playoff talk for Nebraska. It's not that I don't think they can keep getting better. They'll have the schedule to prove it for sure, not just Indiana but beyond. How well do you play in this Saturday's matchup? How are you in Columbus? SC's not an easy road test. Iowa, Wisconsin, UCLA. So it's, all there for the taking and really a second-half kickoff here for Nebraska. What kind of second-half football team will Nebraska be? But we'll check in with Brandon Vogel from Counter Reed. He'll join us in about 15 minutes in hour 2. Gary Barnett, Coach Barnett, will break down Nebraska, Indiana, get his thoughts. He's pretty familiar with that coaching fraternity. And Cignetti, he's interesting in the sense that he's a guy that, and I think you can appreciate him and a little bit more of his background kind of lends itself to his personality. This guy was in his 60s or late 50s when he finally got a head coaching job. And he got a head coaching job at some BFE spot, despite his track record. A guy that played at West Virginia, a guy that coached at Pitt, a guy that worked for Chuck Amato. And the family ties are quite interesting because he's a guy that went and played for Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden left for Florida State. Bobby Bowden promoted Cignetti's dad to the head coach of West Virginia. So these crossovers are pretty cool with Cignetti between the situation of the Bowden setup, but also Cignetti's dad bringing on Nick Saban to West Virginia as a young grad assistant. So that's where the tie-ins are. And think about this in your life where you're making $250,000, $300,000 as a recruiting coordinator at Alabama for Nick Saban. He hires you because Daddy hired him. And Cignetti's track record's good. He's worked for good programs. He recruited Phillip Rivers at NC State, if you remember back 20 years ago, some of us anyway. So Cignetti's been a really high level of evaluator of talent at quarterback, and he's gotten some pretty big-time quarterbacks, let alone players, for that first Saban championship run. So Cignetti just pumps the brakes, takes a 60% pay cut, and says, I'm going to go to the University of Indiana in Pennsylvania he's going to make over $100,000. His wife's got to start working again as a pharmacist. And the guy just wanted to be a head coach instead of this assistant that bounces around every 4, 5, 6, 7 years, potentially, as an assistant. And he was confident in himself. And that late in life, to jump out on the ledge, take a monster pay cut when you've got kids that are going to be in college or trying to go to medical school, which was his case. And he goes from making close to $300,000, $250,000 to a little over 100, and he goes 14-9, gets to James Madison, kills it there, and then his salary went from $650,000. And with these guys, it's not about money; it's about their passion. Yeah, the money's nice; it's incredible. But now he's making 4.25, and he's a toast to college football right now. Elijah, pats on the back, look at Cignetti, and he's a little brash. But the chip on his shoulder is warranted because he's a guy who's had to really start way out there in these outposts of college football just to get someone to say, we want you to be head coach. And now he's risen pretty quickly, but he's not a spring chicken when he's done it. So I respect him for doing that. How long is he at Indiana if things hold true? If they're as good as the stats say they are, they'll be a 10-win football team. They'll do some damage. They've got the schedule to also, like Nebraska, prove themselves. So this is pretty fascinating, and you got a couple of guys that are going about it different ways in this portal era. With Cignetti, he's brought in 20-plus transfers, and his winning culture, the Google me thing, is part annoyance, questioning whether or not he's going to win at Indiana, his own personal belief. Back to that chip on the shoulder. But, from day one, we're out there at media days, like, yeah, I'm usually picked to win the league when I go to media days, not finish 17th or 18th or whatever Indiana was picked. But he's flipped them quick, and I think he's a little different than a Mel Tucker. Mel struck some gold. Mel had some off-the-field things. Cignetti's just a dude that locks himself in his office and grinds away on film. So I appreciate how he's gone about his business.
It's almost like Fleck if Fleck took his Xanax. Like
a little bit.
It's not the perfect comparison.
I mean, they're two different personalities. We'll hear from Matt Rhule here in a little bit, but no, I love this matchup, and I'm still trying to figure out where I lean with what Nebraska I'm going to get. And the other part of this thing Saturday, and from a buzz standpoint, like I think Nebraska fans, and you can tell me if you feel differently or not, but I think Nebraska fans, I mean, they're sick of the graphic of 0-25 against ranked teams. They're sick of the bowl drought. Totally get it. And I know I've hit on two triggering topics or two points, but they want it to stabilize and just go win. And right now you've got some hesitancy with this football team just based on what you've seen this year, because you've not seen a complete football game for 4 quarters on all phases. You have Illinois in the back of your mind. You have questions. And I don't want to make it a referendum every week, but you're not as confident as you were post-Colorado because of just what you've seen this season. And listen, it's year 2. It's still halfway home in year 2. I think Matt Rhule's done a phenomenal job. I think his program's good. I think the defense is killer. He's landed a monster quarterback. There are things that they can do and have done. But overall, I think at this point, this is an early statement opportunity. It's not the last statement opportunity. Nebraska will be fine. How do they end November is going to be your period on the sentence.
But this is a game that kind of sets up how the rest of your season goes. Because you think about the gut punch that was Michigan State and East Lansing last year. Mm-hmm. That gut punch, your best chance to get to 6 wins based on the November slate. You lose that one, you can't get it done. And that team never quite had it. They never quite had that look in their eyes after that Michigan State game.
Well, they were afraid to fail.
Yeah, and you flip it around now. You look at this. This is your second opportunity to get the ranked opponent monkey off your back. Mm-hmm. It's your first opportunity this season to get the bowl drought monkey off your back this season. 2 big things I think would be massive for you to go and you want to go play free whenever you have an opportunity against Ohio State, whenever you have an opportunity against USC. Wisconsin and Iowa, they've had your number over the past decade. Like, you want to be able to play free in those games and not play with the fear of, well, we need this win for a bowl game. Well, we've never been able to do it against a ranked opponent. This is our chance. We're already 0-2 on the year, 0-3 on the year, whatever it may be.
Like, Rhule can ignore those narratives, but it's been a work in progress getting his team to ignore those narratives.
And that's what I mean. This game, in terms of have they taken that next step from Illinois, this is the show me moment. I think they've shown me over the last 2 games that what they were against Illinois is not what this team is, particularly defensively. They've proven that. Now it's the proven opportunity of this isn't the same head case of a team that we've watched over the past 6 years.
I don't think so either.
And this is the proven opportunity to me, because I think this is going to be a close ball game down the stretch. I mean, we know what to expect from Indiana. High-flying offense. They're going to get yards. They're going to get points. Your defense has to get a couple of stops, get off the field a couple of times, generate a takeaway or 2. That's what they need to go out and do. And your offense, I think they've shown themselves consistently this year to be an offense that's good but slightly limited in what they can do. They're going to go put up somewhere between 24 and 34 points, if I had to guess. If I'm forecasting it right now, like maybe the defense helps them out and put some points on the board, but that's what the offense has shown. Is they're an offense that's probably going to put up between 24 and 30. That's what they've done almost every game this year. Whenever you throw to the side UTEP, who is not very good at all this season, and you throw aside Rutgers because of the nasty weather conditions, like that's what they are. You know that. It's just a prove-it game in terms of where's their mentality, because I think they've shown us what they are. They're a good, not great football team that has a chance to beat everyone on their schedule.
It's a move-the-needle game, and it's a move-the-needle game for Nebraska's fan base. It's a move-the-needle game for, all right, you are not just a nice story, but you're a good football team. If you're Indiana, 489-1240 to get in. Justin in.
Do we have a storm warning coming in?
I don't know, man. That's a great question. Well, it's
I assume that had to have been a phone call.
It's the wind. We'll check in with Vogues here in a minute, but Justin in first. Arlo checks in second. NASCAR Eric is in third as we do our starting five here in the stream. Great Red Shark is here. Coach Brandon. Cliff in from Florida in Wilbur. Good to have you, Cliff. Tuck checks in. Tuck asks the question, anyone else sense a different Matt Rhule? We'll hear from Coach Rhule in a little bit. Black Hills Brennan in. Says the cold is coming. Ronnie is here. More of you. And comments coming up. Tiger Shark also checks in. Vogues on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Next hour, we'll check in with Coach Barnett, Danny Burke, Burke's Best Bets, and Damon Benning going to stop by. We say hi to Brandon Vogel, counterread.com, in his football office. And we'll get some of Captain's comments. Ace in, Jeff is here as well. Some of those coming up here in a little bit. Vogues, it's Indiana week. Are you ready for tip-off?
I am ready for tip-off. Quite ready, actually. As I was writing the preview that I put out today at counterread.com, it just kind of got the excitement flowing. This is a fun matchup. It's a fun setup. It's a fun opponent and game and coach. And it's an opportunity that's a little bit, I think, unique for Nebraska in that one, Nebraska's 5-1, like it has its issues like all teams do, but feel like they're pretty good. And there's kind of nothing to find fault with in terms of what the Hoosiers have done to get to 6-0. Played a very similar schedule in terms of overall strength to Nebraska. So I'm expecting a great game, really, really and truly. And then that's pretty fun.
See, Brandon, that's not what Husker fans wanted to hear. Husker fans are tuning into this segment. They want the Brandon Vogel deep dive on why Indiana's 6-0 isn't actually as good as the record would indicate because of some advanced analytic, and you're telling me they're
Throw
actually
dirt
good?
on them. Do it.
Well, I can say for certain that in terms of schedule strength, like there's a couple different places out there you can look at it, and like Nebraska's and Indiana's isn't all that different. In fact, most places have Indiana ranked as a little bit more. As a couple spots higher. I mean, they're both in the bottom third of the country in terms of the teams that they played. But because of that, I do think, I think one key aspect of this game, and Emmett Johnson talked about it on Tuesday, is Nebraska has been in an overtime game. Nebraska struggled against Purdue on the road for a half and found a way to get that done. And then last week, or not 2 weeks ago, against Rutgers, you needed a big time punt to kind of put that game away and dealt with some difficult weather conditions. So it's not that Indiana hasn't been tested. It's just that Nebraska's had a little bit more, I think, in that category.
So I'm going to go to the stream here. Eric says Cignetti is like if Fleck and Gundy had a kid.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's actually about perfect.
What do you think of Sig?
Me? I love him. He's like straight up Yinzer type of dude who comes out there and tells it or says exactly what's on his mind. But I also think that's a little bit of a play in terms of him recognizing he's walking into Indiana, a place that hasn't had a ton of football success, and realizing that maybe the biggest thing he could bring for them was not humility, but confidence. And I mean, I don't think, if he got the Ohio State job tomorrow, he would all of a sudden be the most humble guy. But his comment, Google me, I win. It's accurate. Google him, he wins, and he's winning at Indiana. So I view him as pretty kind of a classic football archetype type of guy. Comes from a longtime coaching family, and has just the transfer portal changes a lot of this. Like Curt Cignetti, I think would have been the same guy in 1984. He wouldn't have had the options he had to make Indiana this good this quickly. So that's a big difference. But credit to him so far. He's made them good enough to go through their first half of the schedule 6-0.
This is an aside. This isn't about the game, but if you're Florida, are you looking at Cignetti at the end of this season? Only 1 year at Indiana. I mean, we saw the Mel Tucker story with Michigan State, and we all know how that ended not well. But if you're a team like Florida, do you look at Cignetti and go 6-0 start with Indiana?
I mean, I think you'd have to if you're Florida. The SEC is also just kind of different. Like for all of the plaudits and praise that Indiana and Cignetti are getting, this week and last week because they were on a bye setting up this big noon Saturday game. Like when he was hired in November, I think people knew it was a good hire, but it also kind of wasn't all that fun. The curb appeal wasn't huge. Like you were just, taking a G5 guy, which JMU had only been there 2 years. So really, I kind of look at this as almost hiring an FCS guy. And it was okay, great. But, that's not where coaching, the public coaching searches, whatever the schools do is whatever the schools do. But when fans or media or people just talk about it, oh yeah, who should Indiana hire? You talk about all the fun options. And Cignetti was just a guy who's I'll just get results. So having this Indiana kind of proof of concept would make him a candidate for that job. Rhule's comments this week, or was it last week? I forget at this point, about how the Big Ten and the SEC are becoming more NFL-like. And I think that's accurate. Makes me wonder what those coaching cycles will be like at those schools going forward. Because if you don't have the ability to kind of energize people on the NIL front, and an ability to realize that there's just going to be more parity, at least within those two leagues. I think we could see in the years to come, it's going to change things in terms of what type of coaches programs like a Florida, if it were to open, are looking for.
Brandon Vogel's with us, counterread.com, Hail Varsity Radio, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter's, where you can follow him. A little bit deeper look to Nebraska and Indiana. And Vogues, we talk about strength on strength here. Nebraska's D, Indiana's offense, Indiana's defense, going by the numbers, is pretty reputable, top 10. I want to go to the Nebraska offense. And not to get too into the weeds with it, but where or who do you think can be big for Nebraska beyond the quarterback? I'm just saying, yeah, Dylan's got to be great. The run game's got to help out. I get all of that, but can Nebraska find a go-to and just hammer away?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think one of the keys for me in this, or at least one of the key numbers I'll be watching, is Nebraska's ability to push the ball downfield in that passing game, which would require, this Indiana team can get after the passer, so it would require pretty good protection. It would require some aggressive play calling, I think, particularly early on. But when I look at Indiana, pretty well-rounded defense, strong up front, strong, but maybe not totally deep in the secondary. And it's just like a comparative, it's not even a weakness. It's just pick your poison. If you wanted to try and exploit something, I think Indiana's linebackers in coverage could be one. So in terms of a guy who could have a big game, the first name that came to mind, and I wrote this in the preview this week, was Thomas Fidone. Doesn't have a touchdown yet on the year. but we've seen him get involved. Can Nebraska kind of exploit that and make those linebackers cover? You can also do that with the slot. You could deploy Carter Nelson in some interesting ways, or some of the other tight ends as well. But that's kind of the one area where if Nebraska were to have success on Saturday, it wouldn't surprise me, because just looking at it from my untrained eye, I'm kind of like, well, that might be your best bet is try to work on those linebackers in the pass game.
And
just real quick, what's your vibe of the fan base? I mean, with the mail and feedback you get, you just kind of, I feel like Husker fans holding their breath a little bit. Get a win, get a wow win, and then let's get back on the bandwagon.
Yeah, holding their breath, I think, is probably the best way to put it. And I think that's a little bit of a challenge in a game like this, because it should be so we've seen Nebraska, of the recent past, go and play like an Ohio State. And Ohio State's a big favorite. Mm-hmm. Ohio State, regardless of what happens on Saturday, will probably be a big favorite again next week. And other than that 2018 game in Frost's first year, like, those games just kind of went like you'd expect them to. Well, here's one where the gap is much narrower, and maybe there's not much of a gap at all. But Indiana's the trendy team. They're the undefeated team. They're the ranked team. They're the team hosting Big Noon Saturday. It should be a great opportunity. It's like, hey, go take your swing. Like, if you win this game, you're going to get a ton of attention, and hopefully within the walls of the Nebraska football program. And I think this is probably the case. That's the message. I think Nebraska fans have just seen too much Nebraska football to be able to just put everything they've seen in the past aside and get there. As I wrote in the preview today, like, it sounds crazy to say it, but I think that thing we were talking about that Emmett Johnson mentioned, the fact that Nebraska has been through some adversity this year, and we all know the record in one-score games, right? Might be one of its biggest edges against an Indiana team that it hasn't trailed all season.
It's Brandon Vogel with us. And Brandon, to combine those last two thoughts on getting those Indiana linebackers involved in the passing game, also what the fans want. Fans have been calling for a long time, getting the tight ends more involved and getting more usage out of Heinrich Haarberg. Feels like a game where those two things could be of utmost importance this week, but also through 6 games, we haven't seen it yet. At what point do you just put that to bed and say, you know what, that's not what Marcus Satterfield wants to do, that's not what he's going to do? Because it feels like a game that Fidone, Nelson, and even Heinrich Haarberg could shine.
Yeah, I'm not ready to put it to bed yet. I mean, I think there's been times where, particularly with Fidone, not so much with Haarberg, because you kind of notice, like, exactly how many times he's on the field for the most part. But with Fidone, there's been times where he's gotten the ball in pretty tough spots, and there's been times where he was open and available in good spots and hasn't gotten the football for various reasons. So I still think there's a big Fidone game to come over Nebraska's next 6. Saturday would be a great time to do it, and I think a little bit of that might be Elijah. Dylan Rhule has been great, but he has been a true freshman at times. He is a true freshman. And just kind of, I think, we talked about it previously, but just kind of taking some of the layups that are there for him, I think would get players like Fidone specifically, and in some cases Haarberg, a little bit more involved.
Vogues, hang tight. Need a little overtime from you. We won't keep you forever. But a couple more thoughts on Nebraska-Indiana. Got to hear about Counter Reed as well, as we got to get to the bottom of this, if there's actually a storm warning or not.
I don't think there is. I've been checking my phone during breaks. Found nothing.
Yes, the 50-mile-per-hour gusts are just messing with our minds. More Brandon Vogel, more from Vogues and Counter Reed. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Some overtime. Brandon Vogel sticks with us here on Hail Varsity. Vogues with Counter Reed, counterreed.com. This makes me laugh. I've never seen the movie all the way through, but seen enough clips. As Anonymous says, I can't get the movie Falling Down out of my head every time I see Cignetti, the old Michael Douglas character, going off in the corner market or at the fast food restaurant. Just going nuts. Have you seen that flick, Falling Down?
Yeah, I have, and like that's pretty spot on. I wouldn't be like, it wouldn't shock me if Cignetti came out Saturday to coach in a short sleeve button down tie and a baseball bat. So,
hey, don't forget about the old pocket protector. That was funny. That's pretty good. So I got to ask this about Nebraska's game plan offensively. Part of you thinks that ball control is key, running game is key, but also being aggressive. You mix that all into a bag, you get what? And I'm asking about Satterfield's attack. It feels like Satterfield has all sorts of toys to go play with, okay? And bless his heart, he's having trouble deciding what's his favorite go-to. If it were you, you're picking the aircraft carrier circa 88 from G.I. Joe. I know you, right? But can you find a matchup or two versus having to get everybody invited to the party and just go to town on that?
Yeah, it's maybe they can. I mean, I think if Nebraska's to find that matchup, it's somewhere in the passing game. So. Doing the deep dive into the numbers, like, you know, Nebraska is a team that kind of runs the ball basically the way we saw it, and kind of all of our impressions, I think, from the first 6 games of like, they'll stick to it, they'll keep running it, they'll gain 4 yards a carry, and you won't have a lot of big runs, and it feels a little bit sluggish and like a slog at times. They can maybe do that against Indiana. But I think the shortest path to victory in terms of Nebraska's offense, at least, is to attack in the passing game. And the challenge with that is, as you get into this part of the season, teams are going to be good, and that's going right into the teeth of, I think, the strength of Indiana's defense. So who can win that matchup? And you'd make the Hoosiers a slight favorite there, but a couple of big plays that way can flip things in a big way. I would expect Nebraska to have at least, you know, a couple of plays cooked up that it hasn't shown to this point, that it was able to install and drill down during the bye week. Like, how big do those plays go? And, you know, and Indiana can do that too. It's a little bit different, I think, when you're sitting at 6-0 and the favorite. So those pieces of it, I mean, I would expect, we talked about Fedoni already as kind of the dark horse guy who could maybe have a big day. But I think it's Nayar and Banks, and of course you get Barney involved as well. But one of my keys, like one of my health checks for this game, was just Nebraska's explosive pass rate. And is it going to take those shots downfield, or can it throw short and make a guy miss and get him that way? Either way works, but I would expect to see a little bit more downfield passing than we've seen lately from Nebraska.
Brandon Vogel's with us here. And Brandon, before we get a score prediction and get you out, we have a comment in here saying, my hat is terrible. It needs to be burnt. And you are a guy who has numerous hats. You pull out a different one seemingly every week on the show. I need your take. It's a Denver Broncos hat for those listening.
It's a little too busy.
A little too busy? It's kind of what I was going for, though.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I figured too. It's a little bit. It's a throwback. Is it actual vintage or?
It's from early 2000s, actual vintage.
Yeah. That's kind of what I figured. That's exactly what it sent me back to. I have always hated that Broncos logo, so I'm not the most unbiased source on that. But because it all felt intentional, I think it works. I think it works for you, Elijah. It doesn't work for me, but it might work for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like your throwback Denver hat.
The other one, the one that's got the D on the front?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The big orange D with the horse bursting through. Vogues, talk to me about Counter Read. How can folks get signed up? You and Aaron Sorensen doing a great job. As always, sign up, and what do folks get?
Yeah, you can just head to counterread.com. That's where you'll find everything. Our paid subscribers get 2 exclusive newsletters a week. They get access to our game day chats, which will be up and running early on Saturday, given the 11 a.m. kickoff time, and have been pretty fun throughout the season. And in a lot of ways, because both teams had a break last week, feels like almost the start of a new season again. So as I said at the top of my segment, at least, like, I'm pretty excited for this game. Like, I think it's going to be good. I think it has the potential to be a real back and forth kind of affair. And the winner comes out of this in a really good spot for the remainder of the season. So it feels pretty high stakes. We'll have that all covered post game and pregame at counterread.com. Like I said, I just put up my big game preview, which is pretty long, given that we've got more data to go to and kind of a more intriguing game to talk about. So you can do a deep dive with us over there at counterread.com if you get signed up.
Vogues, do I take Nebraska to cover the 6.5?
I would. I have Nebraska winning this game. I think I like this. I like the spot. Most of the models out there would tell you to take Indiana. So do with that what you will. But and I pay a lot of attention to the models and what they're saying. But I think this is a good spot. I think Nebraska's ability on defense has to be one of the big differences.
No, right on. Vogues, we'll check in Saturday morning with the weekend edition ahead of kickoff, all right?
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Appreciate you. Good stuff from Brandon Vogel. Let's hear from Matt Rhule. And Vogues isn't wrong with the attack and downfield. How about that Indiana defensive line? Matt Rhule earlier today cut 3 on those Hoosiers and what they do about getting after quarterbacks.
Well, they do a tremendous job with their line games and twist games. You know, they've never trailed, so they've had a lead in every game, and they're able to come out and just attack you and rush you. They've got a great defense, great design. He's an excellent edge rusher. He's got speed to power. He can beat you with the inside move. He can take the edge. A lot of those guys who have all that, they can't also take the edge. He can take the edge, and they do a great job with some of their twist 3-man games, bringing him up and under. So, we'll see all of that. So you take 6, you take 41. 99 is one of my favorite players I've seen who came from James Madison with them as an interior 3 technique, twitchy. The nose is a big, powerful man who can push the pocket. So they have an excellent D-line, excellent pass rush.
We'll see how Nebraska counters all of that. Plenty more to get into. Don't forget, we are on the road tomorrow. We are up in Council Bluffs, Maristar Council Bluffs Casino, where we're going to be live road show Friday, 4 to 6, just outside of Maris Sports Bar and Book. So come on by and see us across the river. It's a road show Friday. We'll wind down this first hour. It's Hail Varsity, and can email Chris at hailvarsity.com.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
About 10 minutes away, Gary Barnett going to join us, Hail Varsity, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. And like and subscribe, Hail Varsity YouTube. You can watch the show that way. Tell a buddy, hit that like button. Also, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Follow Elijah at Herbal Essence at Schmidt_radio for me. A little bit more from Matt Rhule, as we heard about the defensive line from Indiana. And Evan Bland talked about this with us on Wednesday, that 1-2 punch, right? The ranked streak, the bull streak. And I think Evan asked Coach Rhule today how much of the focus has been is getting off that bullish streak, Schneid, or the offer against ranked teams. Cut 7 here from Coach.
I'm only focused on the game. I answered that question last year and never got there, so I'm just going to focus on the football and make sure our guys are locked in. That they're all in on everything that we're asking them to do, and it's been a great week. So to me, it's just about us playing well versus a great team. It
is. Go play well. No Elvano. He is out per Matt Rhule. You do have Tommy Hill. That's going to be a game-time decision. We'll see how Hill's feeling. Elijah, if they get Hill along with Wright, and you can have the option of Buford over Hartzog, can rotate a little bit in that back end. I don't think that's a bad idea.
I think it's a great idea.
I think right. I mean, I love.
It's not only is it not a bad idea. I think it's a really good idea.
I like Hartzog's intensity and tenacity. I just know that teams have picked on the guy for a while, and you need all the dudes you can. So we'll see if you get Hill, but Nebraska will make do. Last thought from Rhule, his message to the team going into this showdown.
What I just said, focus on us. We can't control the other team. It's the same message I said at UNI, the same message I said at UTEP, same message I say every week. The team that plays the best wins. It's not the team with the best roster. It's not the team with the best record. It's not the team who won last week. It's not the team that has the better music in the locker room. Just the team that plays better wins. So have a good week of preparation. Be in the moment, one snap at a time. Don't worry about the scoreboard and go play. And what I respect so much about this team that we're facing is, I think they've outscored opponents in the fourth quarter 80-17. That's a team that's, they're one-score ball games that they pull away from because they stay in the moment. But that's because they got that's a veteran team, a bunch of guys who've won a lot of football, and they know what it takes. And so I think our guys have gutted out 2 straight wins. They've had some big moments. They took a tough loss. They learned from that. And so we're just going to focus on us and just go out there and just play.
Go play, go win, says Nebraska fan Elijah. And we're going to have to put that Hail Varsity parlay to use. As we're up in Ameristar, we were $500 richer for 13 seconds on the last parlay. Thanks, Georgia.
Yeah, I was excited for a second with that one. We're gonna have to go rapid fire with Barney here next hour and see what he thinks about some of these big games.
No, I think so too. Listen, can you speak into existence the pressure factor? You've never trailed. You've scored all these points in the fourth quarter. Big noon's here for you, Indiana. Nebraska's the underdog. I just, Nebraska right now, they've been through enough this year to navigate the ups and downs of a game without getting PTSD. Can they go execute in the moments and in a tight ball game, presumably? Coach Barnett, Damon Benning next hour with Hail Varsity.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it. It's hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. Let's talk some college football. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We say hi to the Hall of Fame coach, Gary Barnett, with us. The Buffs in Tucson against Arizona. Coach, good weekend of college football last weekend. That was coming on the heels of the upset weekend. And now great ball again. How we doing?
Well, I think we've discussed this a little bit, but all these games that used to be out of conference games now are in conference, and they're great games. There used to be bowl games, and now there's the guys on the East Coast playing the West Coast, and it's I think it's great for a fan. Miserable probably as a coach, but it's great for the fan standpoint, I think.
No, for sure. I mean, you had the Rose Bowl rematch of a few years ago just out in La La Land with Penn State and USC. Really good slate this weekend, and, we'll dive into some of the matchups. And what do you know about, or do you know, Coach Cignetti at all? Indiana's head man that has won everywhere, and he's got the Hoosiers off to a hot start.
He's just an old ball coach is what he is, and he's done great everywhere he's been. The whole James Madison story from the last couple of years has been awesome, and now to go into Indiana, which we all know has, under Coach Davis, they had a year there when Penix was playing quarterback, and then they just never quite get over the hump. But boy, they are over the hump right now, and their stats are great, and they're playing everybody right off their heels, and so Nebraska's got the work cut out for them this week. This is playing at Indiana, so this is a tough one.
What do you make of the way that Coach Cignetti has come into the Big Ten and kind of put him on notice with his high-powered offense? You don't see it much with the Big Ten. Usually it's a defense and special teams run-the-ball type conference, but it's had some success in recent years. You think of Jeff Brom at Purdue. He brought his high-powered offense into Purdue, and that worked well. What do you make of the success he's had early with that high-powered offense?
Well, I think you can see it at Oregon. You can see it. You'll see it at Washington. You'll see it at SC. This is Cignetti's just sort of brought that kind of mentality to it. We'll have to see if it survives. All that comes down to is a quarterback every year. So, can he maintain that kind of quarterback play? The system helps, but you still got to have the quarterback anymore to run a system like that, and he's got to be exceptional. And his kid's playing really well. The kid's having a great year, and 315 passing, 200 yards rushing a game. That's a lot of 47 points a game. That's a lot of points and a lot of offense.
Coach, it is strength v. strength Saturday with Nebraska and Indiana. The Husker defense is Nebraska's calling card. You've seen Nebraska this year. We know about Indiana on offense, and they've been incredible. They've never trailed, and then they drop a nuke on you in the fourth quarter. So, they're big time. As you look at each side of the football here, what do you like about Nebraska's defense and that matchup against Indiana, flipping it around? What do you like about the Indiana offense against the Nebraska defense?
Well, you look at Indiana's defense, they're only giving up 14 points a game, almost 15 points a game. But a lot of that is the fact that their offense is on the field so much, that they take opportunities away from you by being on the field so much. And so I think that's the one thing that Nebraska's got to watch is that they've got to, they're not going to get as many opportunities as they get normally. And so they've got to be able to take advantage for their offense of those opportunities. That's where I see Nebraska's biggest challenge here is that Indiana can just overwhelm you with offense, and you're so much pressure on you each time you do get on the field with your offense that you've got to get first downs, you've got to get points, and stay up with them. Their defense alone, Nebraska's only given up 11 points a game, which is, that's a good number, that's a good stat, but you're playing against a team that gets 47 a game. So something's going to break down somewhere, one of those two. And if Nebraska can play that kind of defense and get their offense opportunities, then they'll have a chance. But if they can't get on the field, then that shootout is going to go in Indiana's way.
Yeah, Coach, it doesn't feel like a game that Nebraska wants to play from behind. It's Indiana's strength. They haven't played any snaps this year trailing in a football game. That's what they want to do. They want to take the lead. They want to use that offense to kind of take the opportunities away from you, as you said. So with that in mind, do you think it's a game where Nebraska needs to get on the board early and play with the lead, or can they play from behind?
Well, nobody wants to play from behind, but you get stuck in that situation more than you want to be, and you have to be comfortable with it. I think that's the most important thing is you got to be comfortable being from behind, trusting that you can come back and win. And the only way you can create that kind of feeling is being behind and coming back and win. So Nebraska hasn't been behind too many times either. So it's, have they garnered enough from being behind to be able to survive getting behind Indiana? So points, Nebraska's got to, they've just got to take advantage of field position if they can, but when they're on the field, they got to find a way to get points. And, and they got to eat some clock because this team that they're playing against, they eat a lot of clock and they have the ball a lot.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, do you worry about Indiana, and Nebraska's been trying to deal with this as well, you don't, if it's not going your way, do you wilt because you've not experienced any adversity? Nebraska's had some adversity this year. I mean, you've watched the offense like I have. It's been, missing in some halves of the football. Dylan's still pretty young. And, does he bounce back from a tough Rutgers outing? All of those questions, Coach, take me through how you lead a young quarterback in those adverse moments, how you lead a football team that's really had minimal adversity in Indiana's case.
Well, in Rhule's case, every single snap is a new adventure, and he's got to compile all this stuff intuitively and intellectually, and you don't want him to be in those situations, but you've got to have him get in those situations. So one, you see how he reacts to it, and two, he learns how to react to it, because the best way to learn is to make the mistake. And that can be, that's, you don't want those, but you have to have them. And that's what he's doing this year. He's making some mistakes. Hopefully he's learning from them, because every young quarterback has to do that. They have to go through that procedure, and that's where he is. Indiana, in some ways, Frank he needs some adversity. He needs to find out if his team can survive it. If it's not, he knows the team has confidence. He knows they're playing brashly. Can they do that when things get tough? So in some ways, he doesn't want it, but he needs that kind of an outing where he gets behind, where he has to struggle, because that's how you learn, and that's how your team learns. So it's one of those things where, it's like raising your son, your kids. You don't want them to go through those hard times, but they have to, so they can learn by it. And this is the same sort of principle in coaching. And he's got, you got 6 games left or so, and those are all going to get tougher. So you want to see how you react in those tough situations. So it's easier to not have them and just go on through. But when you get to it and you're not used to it, you don't have those things to draw upon to use in those situations.
And, Coach, when you talk about the adversity, it's going to be a hostile crowd this weekend with Indiana. Sold out. We'll see how many Husker fans make the trip, but there's some excitement around Indiana football. Nebraska's had one road test against Purdue. It was homecoming. It was also sold out, but it wasn't the most raucous crowd that they're going to face. It was also Purdue. Yeah, you said it. I didn't say it, okay? With this Indiana test, 55,000-plus strong are going to be there. It's big noon kickoff. The crowd's going to be into it. What do you make of how that's going to impact Nebraska? They've had the one road test, but it's not the same.
Well, this isn't like playing at Ohio State, and it's not like playing in Iowa, and it's not like playing in Wisconsin. So you could put 55,000 people in there, but that's still not a stadium that, Nebraska plays in front of how many every week. So I don't think that's an issue. Okay. I think the issue is how that affects the Indiana team. I don't think it's going to affect Nebraska at all, but does that give more impetus to Indiana or not? But you still got to, after all the rockets and all the excitement, everything's over, you got to play on a 120-yard field. It's 53 yards wide, and only thing that counts is what happens on that field. So it's football. It's Big Ten football. Your guys should be used to that.
Relevancy is a word that Coach Rhule uses quite a bit, and you want to be a relevant program. You want the team to match the brand, and you've got an opportunity, Coach. What's your thought on this opportunity with Nebraska and Indiana? Not only big noon for Nebraska, but also you got big noon to follow in Columbus. How important is this game for Nebraska and Rhule this second season?
Well, I don't think you can overplay it. Mm-hmm. It's another game. It's the next one up.
Gotcha.
It's Indiana, and you can't look ahead. You've got to go find a way to win this game. Now, I think it'll be a struggle for Nebraska. Mm-hmm. I think everything's going Indiana's way. You look at their numbers, and they're going to be hard to deal with. So Nebraska's going to have to play the best game they've played all year to win this football game. And they're going to have to limit Indiana's opportunities. When they get the ball, they have got to drive the ball. They've got to have long drives. And they got to keep Indiana off the field as much as they can.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, we'll hit some rapid fire before we say goodbye. Bama, Tennessee, as the Tide survived against South Carolina. -3 Bama. Rocky Top trying to bounce back as well. What do you see?
Boy, I tell you, this has the makings of a must-see game. I'm a big believer in Kalen DeBoer, and to me, his genius is in games like this. So I think Bama wins this thing.
Coach, Michigan and Illinois is this weekend, and I'm not sure people circled this one as being a massive game, but Michigan, they've already lost 2 this year. College football playoff hopes are starting to leave their grasp. Illinois, they're 5-1. They only lost being to Penn State. They're trying to get a top 25 win. Michigan, according to Vegas, a 3.5-point favorite. Who do you like?
You know what? I like Illinois at home in this game. It came out initially just 1 point, but now I guess it's 3. But I like Illinois. I like the way their quarterback's playing.
Coach, what's the task for Colorado against Arizona this weekend? They're going down to Arizona. The Colorado's a 3-point underdog as it stands. What are some keys for Colorado to get a victory?
Well, first of all, Elijah, we have got to block somebody. I mean, that game last week, if we would have won it, it would have violated all the rules of the football universe.
Oh, no.
They had the ball 10 more minutes than we did. They sacked us 6 times. We were -29 in rushing. We threw a pick. We couldn't. They rushed for one guy rushed for 182 yards. We were pressured the whole night, and for us to even have been in the lead with 2 minutes left, we were fortunate to do that because we didn't block anybody. And that's got to change, and I don't know if it can. We got to find some running game, but we can't protect our quarterback. We got 24 sacks already.
Was watching a little bit of it, fell asleep, and what a back and forth ball game. How raucous was Folsom?
Folsom was crazy. We lost 4 receivers in that game.
I know.
4. And it was amazing. It was just like they went down one right after the other. And actually, Kansas State, and nobody has said anything about this, Kansas State, for 5 straight plays on defense, when we got a positive play, they had somebody get hurt. It was incredible. The crowd was just booing like 5 straight kids go down for Kansas State after positive gains for Colorado. They got to do something about this flop rule, and because it's becoming too evident, I think.
Yeah, everyone's talking about Dan Lanning with his 12th man on the field late in that game.
A lot of snipers.
I care more about this flop rule. I'm with you.
Yeah, I think Dan just took advantage of the rules, and the guy who has an advantage is always the guy who knows the rules. And he had it, he'd worked on it, and give him credit, and they just changed that. But that's all right. He used it, and who knows if it made a difference or not? We'll never know, but it sure looks like it.
Nebraska -6.5, I should say plus 6.5, 7's the number, over under 50. What do you think in Bloomington?
I think Indiana wins this by 10.
Yep. And lastly, Texas and Georgia. Line's back up to 5 now with Texas.
Start at 3.5. I got to go with Texas. I like all these home teams this time of year.
Nope, totally get it. Coach, enjoy Tucson, and we'll give you a holler from Columbus next week.
Sounds great. Great being with you guys.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it at Hail Varsity, and Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We say hi to, you hear him with Hurrdat Sports every morning, 7 to 10. Damon Benning with us. You're going to hear him on the call in Bloomington, Nebraska and Husker Sports Network. DB, what's the good word, man? How we doing?
Good. It seems like kind of like a business trip, doesn't it? If we're talking about field this week, this one definitely seems like a business trip coming off the bye, man. Nebraska is kind of that team that is used to being the media darling in a spot like this of a meaningful game as a young up-and-comer. But this time, they're on the outside looking in. This one's about Indiana, and I think this is unfamiliar territory for Nebraska.
Well, in the underdog part of things has been talked about, and it's all right to go in with the talking point of the pressure isn't on us, air quote, but there's always pressure, Damon, on Nebraska to show out. And I love the stage. I love the opportunity. I'm just wondering if the time is now for the team to take advantage of this opportunity. They'll keep getting them, but this is pretty interesting to see how Nebraska handles the moment and can they deliver.
Yeah, it is, and it's not often that they go into a situation that seems. Now, this is the caveat. They're going into a situation where seemingly they're relatively peers on paper, but they are the underwhelmingly ignored part of the equation in this two-team deal, right? Usually, if they're on the same plane as typically as their opponent, all right, it's been pretty even, Steven, but there's the kind of this underlying tone, I think, for this story that's more than just a plucky story, because Indiana clearly is a good football team where folks have gravitated towards Indiana in terms of the coverage. So Nebraska's going to have to manage that and keep it in perspective, because at the end of the day, that stuff that fans and us media folks can talk about, Nebraska, for them, it's still going to be all about their process and preparation. If it's anything other than that, the stuff that you and I and Elijah and everybody else around the state like to talk about, then I think, at least for the moment, they're distracted.
Damon, what's your take on the storyline this week that Indiana's untested? They're 6-0. Their opponents haven't been great, but you can also look back at some of these guys that have transferred in from James Madison. They were tested at James Madison. It's a different stop, but just what's your take overall on this Indiana team being untested?
I'm consistent in this. I don't ever think you should apologize for your schedule or your wins. You try to go out and you ultimately want to be the team, and this definitely sounds like a coach, but I mean this wholeheartedly, is you want it to be about you. So you don't really care who you're playing. If you're supposed to score 70 on Western Illinois, then go score 70. If you're supposed to go score 40-some-odd against UCLA, then go score 40-some-odd. You know what I mean? So as a coach, you always want it to be about, are you meeting your own standards? And you look a lot less at the opponent. Now, it is fair to talk about the legitimacy of numbers put up. But what Indiana can't do, and what the narrative should be, is who they play. They got to play who's on their schedule, and they've held up their end of it. Now, if you want to debate, are they top 10 in both offensive and defensive statistical categories around the country? That's fine, right? I get it. That's where strength of schedule and opponent talk comes in. But you can't at all bat an eye at the numbers that they put up, given who they played so far this year.
Damon, how you feeling about the offense for Nebraska with this matchup?
There's this weird part of me, just kind of having a little bit of insight into Dylan's personality and Coach Satt and how they like together. I mean, they weren't real happy with the second half against Rutgers and some of the grumble bugs close to the program about managing the first game in which Dylan looked like a freshman. You heard Coach Satt talk in the press conference about, it was a difficult game in the second half because they didn't feel like they were in a rhythm or very sharp. And I think he wanted to protect where his quarterback was in terms of his style of play on that day, which I think they both would admit would, he finally looked like an 18-year-old. So I love the fact that they're pretty dialed in. You know, Dylan is an early riser anyway. He loves preparation. And Coach Satt is very creative in terms of understanding what his quarterback likes to do and where some sweet spots are. So that part of the offense I really like. Now, the cat mouse matchup will be Indiana kind of does what they do defensively. You know, they got an active front seven. They play a lot more zone than man. You don't really throw it over their head a ton. So they're going to line up and do what they do, and they're going to say, hey, we don't trust that over time you're going to not make mistakes. So from that aspect, I'm like, okay, Nebraska does like playing against zones. They particularly like throwing against zone, so that may be a wash. The key will be with this offense heading into this one, when you were self-scouting like Coach Rhule talked about, what will you do with committing to the run game on the road, and how vulnerable do you think Indiana is against certain sets and how you do want to run the ball? So that part actually intrigues me.
Damon, if Indiana's high-powered offense comes to play, it turns into a shootout, and you have to give the football to Dylan Rhule and say, go make a play, go win us this football game. Does Nebraska win that game?
Well, I think, they're capable. Now, is it ideal? No. But they are capable. You've seen stretches, whether it's 2-minute offense at the end of halves, or when Nebraska has to kind of put themselves in position against the clock. They're capable of getting vertical in the passing game. Is that ideally how they want to play? I don't think so. Are they capable of playing it? Sure. Because I think what we have to remember with Indiana is they don't throw it over their opponent's head either. They're just extremely efficient at the ability to play catch, right? It could be any given receiver on any given Saturday, and it can be one of 3 running backs on any given Saturday. The key to them is their balance. They're even balanced within their balance. And like Coach Rhule said, they've scored 80 points in the fourth quarter. So it hasn't always been a shootout style of game that they played. They're just a team that stays on the gas. So hopefully it won't come to the question that you've asked.
Damon Benning's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Damon, of course, Husker Sports Network. You'll hear him on the call. You catch him weekday mornings, Hurrdat Sports, him and Ravi. So where or who is Nebraska's advantage on offense? Who's an X factor for the Big Red on offense on Saturday?
I like the intermediate pass catchers.
Okay.
I'm kind of looking at how much zone Indiana likes to play, and we'll see how fleet of foot they are on the second level. So I think it's the Fedonis, the Borkachers. Maybe it's a game matchup-wise for a Carter Nelson type on the interior. Maybe not as an inline tight end, but guys that can make some hay in the middle of the field. Because I think outside the numbers, Indiana has some smaller corners, but they do play a lot of 3 deep, so they try to stay as deep as the deepest man in their zone, and Nebraska will have to play catch in front of them. But if Nebraska wants to get the ground game going, I think the plays to be made are in the intermediate passing game to kind of loosen things up and control the box.
One matchup I think back to, and as much of a tough watch as the first half was, the Purdue game, I loved seeing Ramir on Karlaftis. And that was the running back linebacker. It made me scream at some Orange Bowls the other way, where Nebraska linebackers were on a Miami running back, and it didn't go well, brother. But I love that matchup potentially. Nebraska's got guys that they can mismatch, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And I think situationally, this will be the first time since Illinois that Nebraska will have a chance to execute punch, counter punch. I felt like Illinois was always one step ahead of Nebraska a little bit on both sides of the ball, even though Nebraska had their opportunities to put that game away. So when you watch Indiana on both offense and defense, they play a lot more similar every week than Nebraska has so far. So if you're looking for a little bit of a hidden advantage, maybe Nebraska's volatility offensively may play to their strengths on Saturday, because they've shown flashes of being able to do lots of little things over short periods of time. Who will they settle into being over an extended period of time? That still remains to be seen. But if you look at Indiana, both offensively and defensively, they pretty much played the same way. The passing game looks a lot the same. The balance within the run game looks the same. What they do defensively looks the same. And that's not a bad thing. That leads to a lot of their efficiency because they know exactly who they are and they're committed to it. If you're in film prep and you're getting ready over a bye week, this time Nebraska's, like I said, volatility in terms of who they are offensively may play to their strengths because even 6 games in, we're still not quite sure how Nebraska wants to play when they're playing at a high level on offense.
Well, Damon, with that offensive consistency from Indiana, if you put your defensive coordinator hat on, what do you think Tony White pulls out of his bag this week to try to slow that down?
So he's got to play some multiple. I think so. The game within the game is all the pre-snap looks. It's a very rhythmic offense for Indiana, and they have really good balance. So Nebraska cannot be predictable with how and where they line up. They're the only ones that know pre-snap where they need to be post-snap. So be as versatile as you can pre-snap because this offense looks like one in which they can pick you apart when they're in a bit of a rhythm. So I think the pre-snap looks will be critical for Nebraska. The other thing is they got to get guys to the ground outside the numbers. They're a hard team to scout in the passing game from a player standpoint, but from a coaching, from how they want to, what they want to do in the pass game, it's very, very similar. They just have so much balance. It could be one of 4 receivers every week. It could be one of 3 running backs every week. But the manner in which they get there is pretty consistent. They just play the matchups.
Damon Benning with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Damon, incredible insight on this. Appreciate your thoughts. Have a good old trip to Larry Bird country, man, and we'll holler at you as Columbus awaits.
Yep, I appreciate it, man. I've got to be in my seat by noon, so I imagine wheels up at 1 leaving Lincoln.
Good stuff from Damon Benning. Danny Burke with us. Burke's Best Bet on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity. You can find us on Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Danny Burke with us, Burke's Best Bets. Burke'sBeat.com, where you can log on and Stochastic, and The Odd Shopper, where you can find some of Danny's work in his Pride of Chicago home, Danny Burke. Danny, how we doing, man?
Doing good. Feeling ready for the matchup against IU. Definitely a little bit on the nervous side, but it's almost a little bit better feeling than other games, right? Because Nebraska can go in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. Indiana in unfamiliar territory. Fat and happy off the bye week with a nice ranking, almost a touchdown favorite. I don't know. It's unfamiliar territory for these Hoosiers guys.
Danny, are you getting up early on Saturday and making the roadie down to Bloomington?
Not this year. I did that back in, 2016.
You were good luck.
Break. And it was Nebraska-Indiana. Nebraska barely held on. I was visiting my buddy there. But, it was a great time. I will not be making the venture this time around. Maybe some other trip.
So you're the reason they won last time. You're not going this time.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't Stanley Morgan going 75 yards.
You're going Chris Jones, pick 6. You're going to get blamed, you realize, by the friends in the stream. I mean, Tiger Shark's been on a heater today with hilarious comments. The son of Dan Lanning will not be on his way to Bloomington. But what do you think of this? The over-under's right around 50, minus 6.5. I know the narrative is the offense of Indiana versus the defense of Nebraska. What do the offhands do? Indiana's defense is highly ranked. Nebraska's offense has been inconsistent. Are you looking at any plays on this?
First of all, let me address the Dan Lanning's son comment. This is hilarious that this was brought up because I was in the gym the other day after I got this haircut, And I was like, who do I look like? And then I literally thought, I was like, I look like freaking Dan Lanning with this haircut. Like, I look pretty much identical to him. So clearly I'm not the only one who thought that. So that was pretty funny to see it. With this game, look, I'm actually appalled that this line is as high as it is. I mean, I understand the sentiment of people still thinking Nebraska is Nebraska. And it's, hey, here's this hot, shiny new toy. That's the Indiana Hoosiers that's putting up 40 points left and right. But if you look at the strength and schedule, I mean, it's night and day. Cool, you beat Northwestern, who has no home field advantage and really no solid team to show for. Maryland, yes, they won by double digits, but that game is not what it appears to be if you just look at the box score. If you actually watch that game, the Terps made it a lot more uncomfortable for a majority of that game. All right, then you beat up on UCLA, the worst team of the Big Ten, Charlotte, Western. I mean, it's nobody here. And it's not to discredit anything that the new regime has done, anything that their offense has done, the EPA, the metrics, all back them up. I totally understand that. But if this spread does get to 7, guys, I think you have to take Nebraska. And simultaneously, I don't think we're going to see it get to 7 because the books know this. Once it hits that key number of 7, you're going to see a bunch of sharp attraction come right back in on the Huskers. Now, you may be asking, you're saying all that, Danny, so why not take it at 6.5? Well, we understand the importance of numbers. And furthermore, Nebraska is still Nebraska until they prove otherwise for us, right? I mean, you look at that game against Illinois and a strong coach in Bielema, we saw what they were able to do against this Huskers defense on a short week at Memorial Stadium. So with all this momentum trending toward Indiana, it still just makes me a little worrisome to wanting to back Nebraska under the key number of 7. But like I was, leaning toward already in my sentiment, I think it's a great spot in the sense that Nebraska is the underdog here. They do have the chip on their shoulder. Indiana in that unfamiliar territory, all cocky now, ranked. Oh, we're big favorites here. This is when you could catch them slipping if you're Nebraska. So, again, it's either you're taking the points with the Huskers or nothing. Total-wise, I would look toward the over because, again, you have prolific offenses here. We know what Rhule is capable of. Indiana's defense has not really been tested, and when they have, they've been liable. And on the other side, you kind of reference back into that Illinois game. I think Indiana can do similar tactics at the Fighting Illini did against Nebraska, so I do think it's going to be a high-scoring affair.
Good stuff, Danny. Danny Burke with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And, Danny, to Thursday Night Football we go. It's a gross matchup tonight. 2 rookie quarterbacks. Spencer Rattler, he doesn't have his top 2 targets at wide receiver. As for the Broncos, they don't have their best player in Pat Surtain. It's a, I believe, 2.5-point line right now. The Broncos favored. What do you like on Thursday Night Football?
This is what Thursday Night Football is supposed to be, right? A game that deters us from wanting to watch the National Football League. I mean, how gross is this? No Shaheed, no Olave, no Derek Carr, like you said, no Surtain for the Broncos. Bo Nix versus Spencer Rattler, baby. This is going to be electric. Look, you're probably safe just blindly betting the under, but in all honesty, I have not done anything yet. I lean toward taking Kamara over his rushing yards. The dude was on the field for, I think it was like over 80% of the snaps last week with Spencer Rattler in the mix. And I think earlier in the day, he was like 68.5. The thing that scares you there is that, well, you're going to have to be very one-dimensional with Spencer Rattler, and that's known going in if you're this Broncos defense that has been impressive. I think you'll maybe look at someone like a Jawan Johnson over receiving yards. He went 3 targets last week, had over 30 receiving yards, if I'm not mistaken. So Rattler was pretty good at spreading out the ball. I think tight end-wise, Denver, that's where they've been pretty weak against the receivers this year. Jaleel McLaughlin on your side, Isaiah, your running back situation is frustrating as all hell. I mean, with Javonte Williams in the red zone, I feel for people who have him on their fantasy team, took him for an anytime touchdown score. I think it was that game against the Raiders, and somehow he did not get in the end zone. But I think there's a little bit of value with McLaughlin here against a brutal Saints run defense. He was at like 22.5 rushing yards. That would probably be my top selection for a prop because they're slowly kind of getting into that running back by committee type of style, and I think the values on McLaughlin over his shorter prop yardage mark.
Danny, personally, I like the under because, as you said, it's the grossest of the gross of a Thursday Night Football matchup. This game's going to be like 3-0 at half. It's going to be awful to watch. It's an eye bleach type of game, and I think the under might be in full effect tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't think you can go wrong. Go to that direction, that's for sure.
Danny, anything on Sunday you like? Texans, Green Bay, KC, San Fran, Detroit, Minnesota, Tampa, Baltimore.
Yeah, let's talk about the Super Bowl rematch. I haven't done anything in this game yet, but it's hard not to lean towards San Francisco because of that narrative and just because of the overall style that they have and really how they manufacture this team. and you look at Kansas City, incredibly beat up. But the narrative with Patrick Mahomes as an underdog, he's like 12-1 straight up or something ridiculous like that. And then you have the trend of Andy Reid after a bye. So, look, you can argue both ways back and forth, and that's why it's such a narrow spread. Man, I still think I got to lean San Francisco because I just think they have the better talent right now. They're a little bit healthier, and because of that revenge angle. I like Minnesota against Detroit. I think there's going to be a lot of points clearly with a high total. I took some anytime touchdown prop bets. I'm on Rodson plus money was one of them. I like Minnesota in this game, though. No Aiden Hutchinson is going to be detrimental for this Detroit defense that solely revolves around his dominance that he can enforce up front. Minnesota's looked way better than everybody's thought. Minnesota does have one of the best home field advantages in football. I would look at the short spread in favor of the home team in that matchup.
Danny, real quick here, Tampa, Ravens, that number is you're going to be able to get Tampa in 3.5 at home.
About 20 seconds here.
Yeah, that one's a tricky one. I think an angle I would pursue in this spot would be the under, actually. I know everybody's want to go the other way with these two teams, but, you know, the Bucs got this running back by committee. The Ravens really like to rely on Henry and company. I think it's going to be lower scoring, and it's going to be an uglier type of game. So I would actually look at the under. No opinion on a side.
All right, Danny Burke with us, burksbeat.com, at Danny Burke5 on Twitter. Danny, thanks for the insight today, brother.
You bet, guys. Take care.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Reminder, road show tomorrow. Is Hail Varsity going to be at Ameristar, Sports, Sportsbook and Bar, 4 to 6, just across the river. You're in the area, come see us. Love doing the road shows. A lot of Road Fridays will be at Ameristar, Council Bluffs Casino. So you're invited out, 4 to 6. And don't forget the weekend edition gets you ready for Nebraska-Indiana. So we'll have that for you on the Hail Varsity YouTube. Real Red Reaction follows around 2:30 after Nebraska-Indiana. We'll have our minds made up. You can also check out the Average Joe Sports Show pod for some early predictions. Could be subject to change with the Friday forecast tomorrow. Reminder about buckling up. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives, prevents injuries only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. You are going to be all sorts of Denvered up today. You are going to watch that monstrosity. You might flip over to a little baseball, too, tonight.
Well, I'm not flipping over to baseball. You can. No. I will keep
I haven't decided if I'm going to go work out tonight or not. The ankle finally feels good enough to get back on the treadmill. Been a pile of goo.
Yeah, no. I think for me, watching my Broncos, that stress will be enough to work off some calories for me. And depending on how it goes, crying also burns calories. So might be that type of game tonight. It's just going to be ugly. That's my take.
There's some funny fodder in the stream. Becky, thanks for checking in. There's thoughts about me golfing with the former president and how bad the former president would tune me up on the golf course. Probably. You've golfed with me before, and I'm far from good.
Yeah, unfortunately, we won't have the former president on with us tomorrow as a part of the Friday forecast.
No.
He's busy on the campaign trail, so that's not going to be a reality. I'll be honest, like, I don't know. Like, if I was going to be meeting a former president, I don't think the golf course is the place I'd want to do it, you know? Maybe, I don't know, like, is that just me? Maybe I'm just bad at golf.
No, I think the golf course is exactly where you go.
Okay, fair enough. This is any former president.
I mean, as long as you can't fire. They take me to Camp David.
Like, I want them to see the best side of me because they're important people. Every single former president, and they're not seeing the best side of me on the golf course. I'm angry. I'm a head case. I don't want to talk because I just 5-putted the 5th. Like, it's not me.
You do suffer in silence in the golf court when you do 5-putt.
Me in particular, or everybody?
You, but that's okay. I took junior golfing Sunday, and we're both just, I'm being a bad example swearing, and he's being a bad son swearing. Because it was just an awful finish. We'll try and correct that this Sunday. But
you know me, I am I'm one of those people. You hear it from like coaches all the time. Like I need guys that hate losing more than they like winning. That's me. Like,
Okay.
Like I don't find any joy in winning, but I find a lot of anger in losing.
Well, just an angry dude. Find the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play with Hail Varsity Radio. Like and subscribe. Give us a rating.
I need to add really
Get
fast.
to YouTube real quick as well. Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter.
I need to add really fast. I don't that anger is not external, it's all internalized. My therapist says that's good for me, so that's what I try to do.
Oh, so you internalize. You've got a lot of Nebraska fans internalizing this Saturday matchup. But we'll dive in and be back at you tomorrow from Ameristar Council Bluffs Casino across the river. We'll talk to you at 4 on Hail Varsity.